So I just want to start off by sharing what God's been speaking to me about in this in these last days. We have obviously been in the same boat as you, being in the home. It's been wonderful having a bit more time just to focus on God, on family, on just the people that matter. Hearing Joe talk about calling up people who are close to us, who maybe we haven't spoken to for a while, just putting people on our hearts. But often in these times we start to reflect on what really matters as well. And God's been speaking to me about surrender, and I've been reading through Genesis in my daily Bible readings, and came this week to the story of Abraham and how he had this promise that he would be the father of many nations, of many peoples. He would have lots of children, and yet he and his wife were, in their 90s and didn't have any children. And so it felt like a bit of a joke, really. Couldn't quite understand how he'd become a father of many nations when he didn't have any kids. And so he decided to take, he and his wife, well, Sarah encouraged him to do this, but they decided to take matters into their own hands, and he had a child with his servant. And so they then had Ishmael, and Ishmael started growing up, but God said, no, that's not how it was meant to be. I was meant to give you a child with you and Sarah. And so in the end, he and Sarah had a little boy called Isaac. And they were just so in love with this little boy. He was like, just imagine you'd been waiting for almost 100 years to have a child, and then suddenly one comes along. And so they absolutely loved this child, and he was not only their child, but he represented a huge promise that God had given them, that through Isaac there would be generations and generations, and here we are. We are the generations who are now included in that family of Abraham, and God kind of saw that Abraham trusted him, but wanted to test Abraham. And we came to this story this week in my readings, where God is calling Abraham to sacrifice, to be willing to surrender and give up Isaac. And a lot of the stories, if you look at the picture books or picture Bibles, the stories of Abraham and Isaac often have a picture of a little boy, but actually the Hebrew word for the word boy in that passage actually refers to a young man. It actually refers to someone who could be between sort of 20 and 30 years old. And I don't know if you can see this picture. Can everyone see this picture of... This is more like the age. So Abraham would have been about 125 years old, and Isaac would have been sort of 25 to 30, maybe nearly the age of Jesus at the time that Jesus was alive and doing ministry. And so the idea that Isaac went to be sacrificed and was powerless, it isn't true. I think Isaac would have needed to have been willing, because who would have won out of a fight between Isaac and Abraham, with Isaac being the age he is here? Well, there's no contest. Isaac wouldn't have let his dad overpower him. He would have been a willing member in this story, that he willingly went to be sacrificed. And of course the story goes right up until the point where Abraham is going to sacrifice his son, and then God speaks and says, don't touch him, and says, I was wanting to see whether you'd be willing to surrender your son to me, and you proved, Abraham, that you were willing to sacrifice that one child that you loved really dearly. And this story was actually the story I was given for my first ever sermon, which I thought was really unfair. And I remember having to preach on this, and it was just after my eldest son Ben was born, and Ben was a real gift to us, and we were so excited when he was born. But actually, after he was born, a couple of days we discovered that something was wrong, and they said that he needed an operation and it was going to be an invasive operation. He would need to go under anaesthetic and go under the knife. And it felt like we'd got this amazing gift, this amazing child, and then we had to surrender him back to God again. And this week I felt that God was asking me to do that again. We're a family who fall into the vulnerable category because of our boy's health, and I talked about that in a pastoral letter I sent out recently. But I felt like God was calling me again to surrender my family back to Him, surrender those things that are most precious to us back to Him again, to be willing to say, God, I'm going to let go of control. I'm going to give you control again. You are a better father to my children than I can be. You're a better husband to Catherine than I can be. And so many of us are facing the decision about surrender, whether it be for us, like us, it's family, whether it be work and income. Some of you are finding that your job is being put at risk, your salary, your income is at risk, maybe your home, maybe you're struggling to find enough money to buy food, maybe it's loved ones, people who are friends, people that you know that are being put at risk because of this virus. And so we're all being called into a situation which none of us wanted to be in, really, but we're all realizing our need, that we're really needy, that we need help. And I think there are three options, there are three places we can surrender to, three options for surrender. We can surrender to ourselves, where we can be the hero, where we can take things into our own hands, that we can try and protect our family, do all we can to buy up and save as much food and hoard as much food as possible, so that we'll be okay. We'll become the best at what we're doing. We'll be the best homeschool teacher, or we'll be the best the best neighbor, we'll be the best dad, we'll be the best worker in our workplace, so that we'll kind of hang on to that job because we'll prove by doing extra hours that we're worth it, worth hanging on to, and they shouldn't let us go. I've been tempted to try and be the best church leader. I want to give the best messages, the best reflections, so that more people, more views, and people will think St Michael's Flirton, yeah, that's a church we want to be part of when this is all over. It's hugely tempting to try and rely on ourselves, and tempting to be the best, and maybe even become that hero to the community. Maybe feed as many people as possible, deliver as many food parcels, to be that amazing rescuer. And of course, that's not that I'm not saying any of this is necessarily wrong in and of itself. That it's good to try and think about others. It's good to try and be wise. It's good to try and put effort in, and to be a good homeschool teacher. It's good to be a good dad. It's good to be a good son-in-law, and call up your mother-in-law and see how she's doing. It's good to try and look out for others and go and help with the food bank and call people up to see how they're doing. But the question is, are we surrendering to ourselves? Are we putting ourselves in the place of hero? And then the second option is that we can surrender to fate. You know, what's going to happen is going to happen. We can't control it, so may as well give up and just let what happen, and sit back, put my feet up. What's the point in thinking too far ahead? We'll just live for the now, live for instant pleasure, just watch through as much Netflix as possible, play as much Xbox as possible, maybe drink a little bit too much, stay in bed for a bit longer in the mornings, and you know, not bother getting dressed. None of this is true for me. We are enjoying Lions actually, but you know, forget spending money wisely. What's the point? What's there to live for? So may as well just blow it all now. Let's all just kind of live for the now and kind of leave it up to fate. And we can surrender to fate if we're not careful. Now, of course, you know, I'm not saying watching TV is wrong. I'm not saying you know, enjoying a little bit more rest is wrong. I'm not saying that we. I was saying earlier that we should ask God what He is saying in the now, but we can easily just give up and become despondent. And of course, there are also legitimate feelings that you'll be having of feeling low, feeling down, feeling isolated, and those are legitimate feelings, and it's okay to not feel okay. But who are we surrendering to? I want to suggest that we can surrender to God, that we can surrender to the one who knows what it is to completely surrender for us, that He is in control and that He is a good Father, that we choose to let go and we let God take control, that we choose to put the things that we hold most dear back into His hands again. We choose to let go of the control. We let go of the grip that we have on these things that we look to. You know, so many of us have relied on things that are no longer reliable. And I think that's a great place to be in, actually. I think that's a place that God is probably taking us. That we become in a place of need. We enter a place of discomfort, that we learn to rely on Him in a way that we've never relied on Him before. That His ways are better than my ways. His thoughts are higher than my thoughts. I don't know everything. I can't sort everything out. His blessings and His presence is better than anything else I have. Even my own wife and my children, my job, my house, whatever it might be that you look to for comfort, that God is better than all those things. And so if all those things were to go, if I was to lose all of those things, then I'd still be in a place of satisfaction because I have Him, that He is better than all of those things. The psalmist writes that your love is better than life itself. Do we actually believe that? Is His love for you better than anything else? I believe that God wants to take you to a place of complete surrender back to Him. Surrender to discovering the love that is better than life. And so this week I've resurrendered my family back to Him. I've surrendered my job. If whatever happens, God, that You are better. You are worth more than anything else I have. And I believe that God is calling. That's what He calls His followers to do. That He actually says to His disciples. He says in Luke chapter 9, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests and the teachers of the law, and He must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. Then He said to them all, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. And so today I'm saying to God, I'm willing to lose everything, but for You. And what You have to offer me is worth so much more. And for some of us, this will be literally true. For some of us personally, or maybe for others that we know that are close to us, it may be literally true that we may discover losing life. But for some of us, it will be things that are precious to us, that aren't people, things that we hold and value as precious. Are we willing to lose those things for him? And I believe we won't experience true freedom, true satisfaction, true fulfillment until we've been willing to go to that place of surrender. So who are you going to surrender to? Who's the hero? Is it yourself? Is it fate? Or is it God?